Welcome everyone to Planting Joy Gardens Midweek Podcast. It's Wednesday, and today we are going to be discussing all things winter squash. So for the next couple of minutes, we're going to discuss everything need to know about winter squash. Everything from seed selection to collecting that harvest. So I'm Kathy, and let's get started. Now let's begin with the basics, choosing the right seeds. Now there are two main types of squash. There's summer squash like zucchini and yellow crookneck squash, or also yellow squash. And then there's winter squash such as butternut, acorn, and spaghetti squash. Now summer squash are harvested when the outer rind is tender. And that's very different from the winter squash. Winter squash have a hard rind and you pick them at full maturity. In contrast, summer squash need to be picked young in their growth. You don't want them to be more than 6 to 8 inches long. So for those of you who are considering growing winter squash, there's some things to consider. Do you have enough time in your growing season to mature a winter squash on the vine? Also, do you have enough space to grow the squash? And then, of course, the most important thing is, do you actually like the taste? Because they're a prolific plant and you're going to get a lot of winter squash. Now, those of you who are in small gardens, you might want to choose some smaller varieties like patty pans and zucchinis. Those are smaller squash and they can be grown in compact areas. Now, winter squash are very large vining plants. We're thinking pumpkins, butternut, and acorn. So you really have to have the space and the growing time. Days to maturity are anywhere from 88 to 120 days. So you have to have favorable weather to grow winter squash. Now it's time to sow the seeds. Now the seeds need to be sowed in soil temperature that is consistently above 60 degrees Fahrenheit or 15 degrees Celsius. And you want to sow your squash seeds directly into the garden. They do not like having their roots disturbed. And so transplanting is not the best way to grow them. Now you want to take your seeds and you want to place them in small hills or mounds roughly 3 feet apart. Spacing your mounds and creating mounds help to aid drainage. That way your vines can sprawl on the ground and move around, but they won't be sitting in soggy or boggy soil. Now in each hill, you want to plant 3 to 4 seeds, about an inch deep, and you want to water well. Once your seedlings emerge, they will grow very quickly. You'll see your first true leaves. And when you see those first true leaves, that's the time to thin out those seeds that you planted. You want to leave maybe 1 or 2 of the strongest plants in the mounds or the hills you created. Now that your seedlings have emerged, it's time to care for them. So watering and feeding are important. So the first thing, watering is critical. Squash need about an inch of water per week. And during the hot spells of summer or even in the fall, you may have to water more often. More frequent deep waters is the way to go. You want to make sure that you're watering the plant at the base. Avoid getting those leaves wet and consider mulching the area to retain moisture during those warm temperatures. And it'll also help with some weed suppression around your squash plant. Now with feeding, squash need to be fed every 2 weeks with a balanced organic fertilizer that will keep them strong and healthy and help them fight against pests and powdery mildew as well as fungal diseases. Now let's talk about supporting your squash plants. Now winter squash can feel like it's taking over your entire garden and you kind of have to keep it in check. So if you're growing in a smaller area, you might actually want to train your vines up a trellis by Placing the plant on a trellis, it lifts the fruits off the ground. You're less likely to have to deal with rotting fruit. You'll have fewer problems with pests. And by lifting the squash plant up off the ground, it makes it easier for the pollinators to find your flowers. And since we're talking pollination, it's important to know the difference between the male flowers and the female flowers. Of course, bees, they don't care. They go from flower to flower. But if you notice that you're getting a lot of flowers, but none of the fruit are developing, you may need to hand pollinate, or you may need to simply lift those vines up off the ground so it's easier for the bees, the butterflies, the ants, the hummingbirds to actually find those flowers and do the work of pollination. Now, if you would like to hand pollinate, you can simply locate the male flower, which has no fruit. It's just the stem behind the flower. You take a little Q-tip or a makeup brush, sweep a little of the pollen on there and transfer it to a female, which actually has a miniature fruit behind the flower petal, and just simply transfer that pollen from the male to the female. Now that we've worked out pollination and we have pollinated fruit developing, we have to keep those vines alive. So winter squash have some pests and disease that you have to address. They're very robust, but they have some definite enemies. The first one being squash bugs, the next one being cucumber beetles, and then the last one is being powdery mildew. Now you can eliminate the squash bug and the cucumber beetle issue by planting later in the season when those bugs have completed their life cycle. But powdery mildew continues to be a problem. And the best way to address powdery mildew is to only water the soil. Avoid watering the leaves. The best way to keep the leaves dry during watering is to have those vines up off the ground. Now you also want to plant your squash in an area that gets plenty of sun so that you don't have moisture condensing on the leaves throughout the course of the day. And then the other thing, you want to make sure you never water at night. Now we have no control over rainfall, but if you are watering with hoses and containers, do not water in the evening. You want those leaves dry as possible. Now for our insects, those squash bugs and cucumber beetles, when you see them, just hand pick them. Don't come back tomorrow to get them. Get them immediately. You don't want to give them the opportunity to lay eggs. The other thing, soil-borne illnesses that plants can acquire. Again, water at the soil level. Do not allow the water to splash on your leaves. If you do these things, you should have very healthy vines that will produce amazing fruit for you. It's finally harvest time. You've planted your seeds, you care for your plant, and now we're going to harvest. So to harvest winter squash, you want to wait until the rind is hard. You should not be able to depress your fingernail into that skin, the rind of the plant. You also want to make sure that the stem is brown. So that squash needs to stay on the vine until it's fully mature. And then after maturity, you want to give it about a week to 2 weeks to cure on the vine. And when the stem is totally brown and the rind is hard, it's okay to cut it away from the vine. Now, when you cut it, you want to leave 2 to 3 inches on the fruit. That'll encourage it to heal over and cure very well. It can be stored anywhere from 6 months, and if you do a really good job of maintaining moisture and temperature, you can store some winter fruits up until a year. So this has been Kathy. We have gone through the steps of growing winter squash, and I just want to thank you and wish you all the best of luck in growing and harvesting winter squash. Now, if there's anything you want to hear on this podcast, leave a comment. Thank you for joining me. If anything has been helpful today, please push that like button. I'll see you next Wednesday for a podcast and Saturday for a video.